The prospect of a significant shift in the US-Ukraine relationship looms as the Biden administration and Ukrainian officials prepare to meet in Saudi Arabia this coming Tuesday, marking the beginning of fresh talks between the two nations. One of the central points of discussion is a potential lift on the US ban that currently restricts the provision of weapons and intelligence to Ukraine, an embargo that has strained Ukraine's military efforts in recent weeks. The US ban, which has been in place for months, has placed Ukrainian forces in an increasingly difficult position on the battlefield. In recent days, this embargo has directly impacted Ukraine's ability to defend crucial territories, as they've been forced to reroute reinforcements to secure vital positions. The pressure on Ukraine's forces has reached a critical point, particularly in the southern Kursk region, where Russian forces have ramped up their military operations, targeting Ukraine's strategic bridgehead. This region, which had initially been a part of Ukraine's key defense plans, has shrunk dramatically. Over the past few weeks, Ukrainian officials have expressed concern that without adequate support, they could lose their hold on these territories, which are seen as essential bargaining chips in any potential peace talks with Russia. In the lead up to the talks, British officials have weighed in on the matter. The Ministry of Defense issued statements warning that Russia has been applying increased pressure on Ukraine's military positions in the south, with Russia's military forces reportedly closing in on Ukraine's positions in Kursk. At present, Ukraine's military control over the area has shrunk from more than 1,300 square kilometers to just 300 square kilometers, further intensifying the urgency of securing additional military support. As the situation becomes more dire for Ukraine, Kyiv is turning to the United States to lift the embargo and provide the much-needed military assistance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has been on a diplomatic tour of the Middle East, arrived in Saudi Arabia on Monday. This trip marks a critical juncture in his efforts to rebuild international support for Ukraine. His meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was expected to help set the stage for the Tuesday talks with US representatives. The delegation representing Ukraine in Saudi Arabia includes key figures such as Andriy Yermak, the chief aide to President Zelenskyy, Rustem Umerov, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, and Andriy Sybiha, Ukraine's foreign minister. They are set to meet with Steve Witkoff, a special envoy from President Donald Trump's administration, as well as US officials such as Senator Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. The timing of these discussions is crucial. The US-Ukraine relationship has been tense following a public disagreement between President Zelenskyy and President Trump just weeks ago. Zelenskyy's exit from a White House meeting with Trump had further strained relations, leaving some observers questioning whether the US would offer the support Ukraine desperately needs. However, the fresh talks in Saudi Arabia could serve as an opportunity to reset the relationship and address pressing issues, including the lifting of the weapons and intelligence ban. A key demand from Ukraine is a partial ceasefire, particularly in the air and sea domains, which could pave the way for broader peace negotiations. This ceasefire, according to Ukrainian officials, would halt long-range strikes on Ukrainian territory, providing a temporary reprieve for Ukraine's military and civilian infrastructure. However, many Western diplomats remain skeptical about the feasibility of this proposal, especially given the ongoing instability in key regions of Ukraine. While the US has not fully committed to Zelenskyy's ceasefire request, there are discussions surrounding a potential agreement that would grant the United States access to Ukraine's rare minerals. These minerals are seen as critical to various industries, and some diplomats believe that such a concession could help sweeten the deal for the US, potentially influencing the Trump administration to lift the embargo. Nevertheless, Ukrainian officials face considerable hurdles in convincing the US to restart weapon supplies. While the offer of rare minerals may provide some leverage, the Trump administration is expected to demand further concessions in return for lifting the embargo. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, has already indicated that Ukraine may need to make more substantial sacrifices in terms of territorial concessions during any peace talks with Russia. Suggests that the US believes Ukraine may have to cede some territory to secure a long-term peace deal with Russia. In his remarks, Rubio indicated that the US understands the complexity of the situation. The Russians can't conquer all of Ukraine, and obviously, it'll be very difficult for Ukraine in any reasonable time period to force the Russians back all the way to where they were in 2014, he said. Rubio's reference to the Kremlin's annexation of Crimea in 2014 underscores the US stance that the current conflict cannot be resolved through military force alone. These remarks point to a broader shift in the US perspective, where President Trump and his administration appear to be leaning toward a diplomatic resolution that could involve territorial compromises. Some Western diplomats and analysts view this as a pragmatic approach. Given the military stalemate and the heavy toll the conflict has taken on both Ukraine and Russia. For Ukraine, the prospect of such compromises is deeply unsettling. The country has already endured significant losses in terms of both human lives and territory, and the idea of ceding additional land to Russia is unlikely to be met with widespread support among the Ukrainian public. Nevertheless, Zelenskyy and his aides appear to be under increasing pressure to pursue a negotiated settlement that includes territorial concessions. In return, they hope to secure a ceasefire and ultimately a more permanent truce. Adding further complexity to the situation is the issue of NATO membership. Ukraine has long sought to join NATO, viewing membership as a safeguard against Russian aggression. However, US officials have indicated that NATO expansion could be a sensitive topic in the upcoming talks. While NATO has expressed support for Ukraine, especially in the form of military aid and training, the possibility of Ukraine's full membership in the alliance remains uncertain. This issue is likely to be a major sticking point in any peace negotiations, as Russia has consistently opposed NATO expansion in Eastern Europe. In addition to the military and territorial considerations, Ukraine also faces economic challenges that complicate the situation. The ongoing war has devastated large portions of Ukraine's infrastructure. With the economy struggling to recover, the lack of adequate military support has exacerbated these economic woes, making the lifting of the US weapons and intelligence ban even more critical. Ukrainian leaders argue that without a more robust military response, their country will continue to face difficulties in maintaining its sovereignty and territorial integrity. On the international stage, Ukraine has garnered significant support from European nations, with several countries offering financial and military aid. However, the US remains a key player in the conflict, and its actions will significantly impact the trajectory of the war. The US's decision to lift or maintain the embargo will send a strong signal to both Russia and Ukraine, influencing the future direction of the conflict. As the talks in Saudi Arabia begin on Tuesday, all eyes will be on the outcome. For Ukraine, the stakes are high. A decision to lift the embargo could provide a much-needed boost to their military efforts, enabling them to better defend against Russian aggression. However, the US is likely to demand significant concessions in return, which could have long-term implications for Ukraine's territorial integrity and its relationship with Russia. In the coming days, it will become clear whether Ukraine's leaders are willing to make these concessions, and whether the US is prepared to offer the support Ukraine desperately needs. The talks in Saudi Arabia will be a crucial moment in the ongoing conflict, and their outcome could shape the future of both Ukraine and the wider region for years to come.